If you're a fan of the 4:30 movie, you'll love Best Movies Never Made, hosted by myself, Josh Miller.
And Steven Scarlatta,
where we explore some of the greatest movies never made, like E.T. 2,
Johnny Quest,
Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian,
and Halloween 3D.
New episodes available every other Monday, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hello, I am not Spock, but if I were, I would tell you to listen to the Inglorious Trexperts, in which our Trexperts talk Trek every Saturday, wherever you listen to podcasts. Oh, and live long and whatever.
Hey, this is Mark A. Altman, and if you're a Star Trek fan and you haven't already picked up the hardcover edition of the 50-Year Mission, it's time for you to go out and get the paperback version of the 50-Year Mission, which is just out in paperback from St. Martin's Press. This is the complete oral history of Star Trek, the first 25 years, from me and Ed Gross. And if you think you know everything there is to know about Star Trek, think again. The 50-Year Mission, out in paperback now. And if you can't read, the audiobook is still available. Hey, are you DAREN DOCHTERMAN from the 4:30 movie?
Why, yes, I am.
Well, I recognize you because I have the Electric Now app, and I get to see all these great Electric Surge podcasts on video for the first time ever.
I'm delighted. I'm delighted that you came up to me and said hello.
Well, I got to tell you, how can I watch all these incredible podcasts like Inglorious Trexperts, The Best Movies Never Made, and other things?
Well, you can find us on Distro and on the Electric Now app.
And Stirr.
And Stirr, see, I knew you knew it.
I did know, because I'm not really a stranger on the street. I'm Mark A. Altman, your co-host.
Well, maybe I should have been watching these podcasts all along. I would have recognized you.
Join us on Electric Now, currently streaming on Distro TV and Stirr, and coming soon to the Electric Now app.
Back in the 70s and 80s, before the advent of VHS, chances are if you saw a classic movie, it was on the 4:30 movie. With their famous theme weeks, it was a chance to see movies you'd never seen before and get reacquainted with some old classics. So now, join us for the 4:30 movie.
Welcome to a week that... Hey, I'm about to do a dramatic introduction,
Oh, yes,
guys.
yes. Very dramatic.
Welcome to a week that is dark as night on the rainy streets of Los Angeles. Here in our shadowy studio, we prepare to curate a fantasy theme week of the best, and maybe not some of the best, noir movies of all time. It's Noir Week on the 4:30 movie.
Thefts, 33 burglaries, 18 robberies, 7 assaults, 5 morals offenses in the past 30 days. Quite a record even for the 4th Precinct, Lieutenant Dietrich.
As things are, the only merchants safe from harm in your precinct are those who take wagers on the horses. I want to know why those parlors are still operating.
I close them down, but they only open up again.
You don't close them hard enough. Rip out the phones. Smash up the furniture.
People like to bet the horses, sir, and just because the law says no.
I don't want your opinion of the law.
What's the big idea standing there staring at me, Uncle Lon?
Don't call me Uncle Lon.
I thought you liked it.
Maybe I did. I don't anymore.
What are you sweating for? Money makes me sweat, that's all. It's the way I am.
Dick.
Yeah?
I'm scared. All those cops out there.
They don't worry me one little bit. I'll drive slow. Head right down the main boulevard in 10 hours.
I'll be home.
Dix, honey, how are you going to drive all that way?
I'll make it.
No, not in the shape you're in, not in a million years.
I'll make it.
Dix, let me go with you. Please, Dix, please.
You're crazy. I'm on the lam. I'm wanted bad, packing heat. If there's any trouble, what good would you be?
I could drive.
No, doll. I'm wanted on a killing rap. You know what that means.
I don't care. I just want to be with you.
All units, strong arm slugging. 3216 River Drive.
We send police assistance to every one of those calls. Because they're not just code numbers on a radio beam, they're cries for help. People are being cheated, robbed, murdered, raped. That goes on 24 hours a day, every day in the year. And that's not exceptional, that's usual. It's the same in every city of the modern world. But suppose we had no police force, good or bad. Suppose we had just silence. Nobody to listen, nobody to answer. The battle's finished. The jungle wins. The predatory beasts take over. Think about it.
Some of you may pronounce it Noir.
There we were in West L.A., looking at a stack of VHSs 2 men high. It was an ugly day, a dreary day, a day filled with junk.
Okay. Anyway, welcome to Noir Week. I'm here with Steve Melching.
Hello.
Mr. Darren Doctorman.
Hi there.
And Private Dick Ashley Miller.
Yes.
And I'm wearing my fedora just for the occasion. So we can talk about the great genre of film noir. Steve, what is film noir?
Film noir. No, I mean, it comes from the French term for dark film or black film. It typically refers to movies that are about the seedier side of life and crime stories and mysteries. The hallmarks of it being a lot of those. The early films were shot in black and white with a lot of deep shadow and mystery, and you never knew which characters could be trustworthy. They were often involved a femme fatale, a female character who was driving the story and had her own agenda and often led the male leads to their doom.
Thus the fatale part.
Yes.
It was kind of the hangover from the jazz age, in a sense, and then war came, and of course
these really were pretty much all post World War II,
post-World War II movies,
late 40s into the 50s is considered the heyday of the film noir.
And America had been sort of an isolationist, after World War I, and suddenly got drawn into another war in Europe, and I think it was kind of a wake up call of how truly screwed up the world was, and how dark. The flip side of life, and what noir so successfully looked at and shone light on is sort of the twisted and dark side of people, and the places the things they do, the places they go.
We got that boy coming over here today. If I can trust my eyes, and I think I can, Susie knows all about your dirty work. Can't hurt. Can't hurt. I had to get that boy his job back.
Look, JJ. We can tie this off in a one neat bundle. Address it to the dumps, to oblivion. We're doing great, but please do it my way. I've cased this kid. I know his ins and outs. He's full of juice and vinegar, just waiting for a big shot like you to put on the squeeze. You got the boy's job back, okay. But he's not going to accept your favor. The manager, yeah, but not that boy.
What has this boy got that Susie likes?
Integrity. Acute. Like indigestion.
What does this mean? Integrity.
A pocket full of firecrackers. Waiting for a match. It's a new wrinkle. To tell you the truth, I never thought I'd make a killing on some guy's integrity.
I'd hate to take a bite out of you. You're a cookie full of arsenic.
Just and it's such a fascinating. It's one of my favorite genres of all time. I mean, one of my favorite genres, and it's a very exciting week. investigate. Darren, I have to ask you though, because there's the traditional noir, which is the post-war films that a lot of people say ended with Touch of Evil. And then there's the neo-noir age, which is, sort of starts in the 70s with stuff like Robert Altman's Long Goodbye. And
well, let's not mention any names of things because we might spoil.
And going into the 80s,
right?
And even the 90s. Do you feel that we should stick with traditional noir, or is everything on the table?
I think everything's on the table.
Everything's on the table, babe. So we're going to deal with both film noir and neo noir.
I would think so. I mean, noir to me is more about the subject matter than the trappings. I think that certainly the way the films were made in the 50s and the 60s gave them that look, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only sort of explanation of what noir is or should be.
Well, and the traditional thing that we associate with film noir, of course, a lot of it had to do with the fact that during the war, the studios had less money. A lot of their technicians had enlisted or were drafted. So, the things we associate with noir, the conventions like shadowy, had to do with the fact that they had less lights, they didn't have enough money, and a lot of that style, that house style, particularly with Warner Brothers, where it was an outgrowth of the gangster films, came from that.
Right.
But
color film was more expensive. At the time, it was still relatively new. In the 40s.
No, absolutely. And that's, towards the end of the golden age of noir, you have a lot of these, it's the same thing that happens now when you have very little money, a dentist is giving you money, you make a horror film because that's all the money you have to do. And a lot of these studios were making noir films because they were generally cheaper to do. There weren't a lot of the studios that were doing big, expensive noir movies. You had a couple of them, and we'll talk about them. But, you more likely had some of these small independent studios that were doing noir films.
They were easy to shoot in a couple of locations or a couple of sets and maybe some limited locations or backlot sets. They were typically made relatively quickly. They generally didn't have a long running time. They were usually about 80 to 100 minutes long.
And more than any element, I guess we established the femme fatale, and we established the shadows, but it's moodiness. There's something moodiness about film.
An atmosphere.
There's an atmosphere. Yeah, both in the visuals and in the tonality of the characters and their obsessions and the way they deal with each other. So I think, why don't we start with Steve for Monday as we look at our first noir week.
Monday. It was overcast in the city of Los Angeles. No. My pick for Noir Week is actually one of those neo-noirs that we mentioned, and it's a film that I loved instantly the first time I saw it in the theaters, and it's one that's not readily available right now, although it is readily streamable, but it's out of print on disc.
Can I guess?
It never came out on Blu-ray, yes.
After Dark, My Sweet?
No.
The Grifters?
No.
God damn. Okay. Go on.
It's a movie from 1992, directed by Carl Franklin.
Oh, yeah.
And written by Billy Bob Thornton and Tom Epperson, called One False Move. It's a terrific nasty little noir starring Billy Bob Thornton and the late great Bill Paxton as a small town sheriff. And it's a really terrific movie about a kind of a drug deal gone bad in Los Angeles, and the villains go on the run, heading east towards Arkansas, and the police officers that are tracking them from L.A. and how they team up with the small town sheriff played by Billy Bob Thornton, who ends up being revealed having a surprising connection to one of the villains, the femme fatale, played by Cinda Williams, and it's a great film of contrasts where you've got the city cops and their attitudes coming from the big city of Los Angeles, and Bill Paxton's sort of good old boy, sheriff in Star City, the fictional Star City, Arkansas, and then you have the villains. You have the Billy Bob Thornton playing this really kind of hothead, greedy kind of dumb guy, and an African-American actor, Michael Beach, playing this cold, intelligent, calculating character. And it's a lot of the drama comes from the conflicts between them and their attitudes and what they want to do as they're fleeing the law and trying to sell the drugs that they've stolen in Los Angeles. And it was Gene Siskel's favorite movie of that year, and one of mine
champion
too.
of it.
Yeah, and it has a terrific, ambiguous ending, like a lot of noirs. I'll just read a little quote from Roger Ebert, who also loved the film. He said, on the very short list of great movies about violent criminals, One False Move deserves a place of honor besides such different kinds of films as In Cold Blood, Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, Badlands, and The Executioner's Song, and At Close Range. It begins as a crime story and ends as a human story in which everything that happens depends on the personalities of the characters. And that sums it up perfectly, because it's a very plot-driven movie in the beginning, but it becomes so personal to this small group of characters by the end and their interrelationships that it's just a riveting little movie that I really wish people would see more of.
Well, hopefully after they hear you're extolling its virtues today.
I watched it on
check it
Amazon
out.
Prime. You can rent it on Amazon Prime in HD, and I believe a couple of the other streaming services also offered it for paid sale or rental, but it's not on disc currently.
Darren Docterman, Tuesday.
Yes. I've been going back and forth between a few titles, but I think I'm going to settle on another neo-noir film from about 10 years earlier, from 1981. And this is Lawrence Kasdan's Body Heat.
Yes.
It is we were talking about throwbacks before. This is definitely a throwback. This has sort of all the tropes of a noir picture, but set in the South, where it's steamy and hot, and everything is dripping, literally and figuratively. It stars William Hurt as a man who doesn't seem to be awake. He's walking through his life, and he has no idea what's going on around him. And Kathleen Turner, who is the femme fatale and not what she seems, and even more of not what she seems later on when we find out what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And Ted Danson plays Bill Hurt's friend,
Yeah.
and he's kind of a jerk, and things happen, and it's very fun to watch all the sort of machinations.
Mickey
that go
Rourke's
on.
in it briefly too, and he's great.
That's right. Right.
One scene, but he's really good.
Yeah, but it's very well written, extremely well acted. There are it certainly pushes the boundaries of what a film noir film would have done in the 40s, certainly. It's a bit racy, and it's very exciting, and it's a steamy one.
Yeah, Kathleen Turner is very alluring,
indeed,
luminous. Some might say.
And one of the things, look, it's a great pick. I love Body Heat. John Barry's score,
absolutely,
is incredible.
One of my favorite John Barry scores, and I'm not necessarily a fan of John Barry's scores because of he has a tendency to repeat a lot of things all the time. But in this instance, it's perfectly appropriate.
Yeah, see, I love John Barry, and this is one of my favorites, along with the Bond scores. It's really just a brilliant score that captures everything about this movie, the sexiness and the mystique and the
mystery and intrigue and
it's just again, Lawrence Kasdan, he just done Continental Divide, and really interesting story. I'm sure Steve can speak to this. That when he got Alan Ladd to finance it, the only way it happened was George Lucas had to agree to sign on as a producer,
right,
because they weren't sure that Kasdan would be able to stay on budget and on schedule and deliver. And basically, George Lucas did it and then took his name off it, not because he didn't like it, but it was just the godfather of the movie, and helped Kasdan, who had helped him on Raiders of the Lost Ark and Empire Strikes Back. And it's another example of what a great George Lucas.
Kasdan's script for Continental Divide helped get him the job writing on Empire and Raiders.
Yeah. And it really shows. Kasdan is really well directed. I mean, it's a very well directed movie. It's not just brilliantly written, but he knew how to use the camera. Yeah. He knew how to create suspense and a sense of mood, and darkly fatalistic film,
and yet full color.
But it feels like it's in black and white.
Exactly. What's really interesting about that specifically as a pick is what it points out about the visual experience of a noir, right? And I guess we're talking about neo-noir now, but there is always a very strong sense of place. It's not, to me, it's not about the lighting. It's not about whether it's color or black and white. It's, it is, all other things being equal, does the environment the story is taking place in, does it feel like it's a character?
Right.
Is there something about that environment that adds
to the mood? Yes.
That's exactly right. So whether it's taking place, in the rain-slicked streets of, San Francisco, or it's like taking place, in the sunlit, whatever of Los Angeles, or in the bayou, right? As long as that environment feels like it somehow reflects what the hero is up against, or what he's in the middle of, I think it always works, and that's what's great about Body Heat. It's just, it's a beautiful film, and not just because of Kathleen Turner. It's just it's a beautiful film, and you can't watch that movie without feeling like the movie world itself wants to kill us. Right, like it's just threatening by existing, and I think in the great noirs, I think that's nearly always true. Like I can point to different stories and tell you, well, that's a noir setup, but whether the film itself feels like a noir has a lot to do with what's created on screen that we're actually looking at in the context of the story that's being told.
Right.
No, I mean it's so interesting, and it's another one of these films like Halloween launched like a decade of really low budget slasher movies. Body Heat launched like a decade of really bad sort of softcore thrillers. It's like Wild Things was the high budget version of that.
Right.
But there were so many in home video, these awful movies, which were like these sexy thrillers,
and a lot of the shows that were on the USA
Silk
Network.
Stockings.
Yeah. And but really, one of the only films that did it right was Body Heat, because Body Heat is an incredibly sexy movie, eroticized, but in all the best ways for the right reasons.
I mean, there's no mattress shopping in it, but it's still
that scene where Kathleen Turner and William Hurt go out and they buy a TiVo is astonishing.
Yeah,
you guys think you're so funny, but that episode won't even have aired when this is on.
All right, so it's a call forward. Is that a call back?
Backshadowing.
Don't call it a callback.
Yes, that's foreshadowing.
Been telling this joke for
years. That's it's a great pick. It's a spectacular movie, and Lawrence Kasdan just was lucky enough to see him speak once at the Writers Guild, and I'm such a fan of his. Even though in the last decade, maybe a lot of movies like Dreamcatcher haven't been hits, haven't been successful creatively or financially. It's just like you look at his career and it's just remarkable, and what he did with Solo is really good. But I'm always rooting for him. I'd love to see him do something else that really catches on in a big way. I think he's so talented, so smart, and I love that movie. I was obsessed with that movie. I think I saw it for the first time on home video. Didn't see it in a theater. I've seen it subsequently in a theater, and but love it. And there's so many of these movies that pay homage to, like everybody knows. I mean, it's a big ripoff of Double Indemnity, although he denies it. But so many movies that pay homage, and sometimes in a comedic way, sometimes in a sort of a clunky way. This really is a traditional classic noir in the neo-noir era.
Right.
And it's another thing I love about it. So anyway, so Ashley, Wednesday.
So Wednesday, man, look, this is a very hard category for me because there are so many films in this category, almost all of which I love because this is one of my favorite genres. I think Steve could probably attest to that. As a couple of weeks ago, that would be telling you what the hell we've been doing. But let's just say that noir is a very ambitious. It's a very ambitious genre to get involved in, but I love it because there is something about following a character who feels like he or she could be you and me, and they're in a world where nothing makes sense, nothing can be trusted. Everyone is basically against you, except for the people who are really on your side, but they're not the ones that you trust. I mean, it's just I love all of that. I love that as a consumer of it, and I love that as a writer. I love being in those worlds. There's something about it because I also think that in spite of some of the nihilism that suffuses a lot of this, that they're very moral stories. Mm-hmm. They're really about something, and they're about, you have a code and you break it, right? Or you don't have one and you find it. And when they really, really sing, everything is about, that code and the consequences of it. So I love this genre. I mean, again, they can be funny, they can be scary, they can have a lot of action or no action at all. So again, tough for me to decide. And I'm going to save all the ones I'm not going to talk about for Friday, rather than tell you what I'm not picking. But I'm going to tell you what I am going to pick. Okay. So sometimes we go to the theater and we find a movie, we sit down, we watch it, we have no idea what we're getting ourselves into. We walk out, we're like, oh my God, that movie just rocked my world. And my pick for Wednesday is a movie that did that to me, and I'm talking about Nick Refn's Drive. Drive blew me away. I went to that movie expecting, it wasn't that I was expecting not much. It was that I had no expectation whatsoever. In fact, I had, these strange kind of ambivalent feelings going into that film, because I had, there's a lot of reasons for it. I had a meeting with Nick Refn at one point that was just, it was bananas. It was cool, but it was bananas. And I thought, he comes off as sort of very, pretentious and European. And I remember going into that movie thinking, what could this guy possibly have to say, in this space, in this genre, with this story? And oh my God, I'm a believer. Ryan Gosling, also, that was another thing. I had no appreciation for the Gosling. Ryan Gosling in this movie is just a revelation. He is absolutely fantastic as the driver. He is a man of few words. In fact, there's a great story about the making of this movie that the original script had way more dialogue in it. And when they got to the stage, they just started tearing dialogue out right and left until it basically became pure cinema, except for a lot of supporting characters like, Bryan Cranston or the great Albert Brooks. But essentially, it is about a guy he's a stunt man, he's a stunt driver, he's one of the greatest drivers in the world. He is also like the wheelman, for these incredibly dangerous, high-risk jobs. The movie opens with an incredible car chase through downtown Los Angeles, and you really get a sense of what this guy can do.
People talk about the great heist scenes, like Rafifi and stuff, which are... I think that the beginning of Drive belongs with the classic, that where he ends up parking the car at the Staples Center.
Yep.
It's just one of the great for opening 10, 15 minutes of movies. When people say, 2000s, there haven't been many great movies, Drive is one of those movies.
Oh, the suspense and the timing and everything in that opening sequence is terrific.
100%. And the way that Refn, the movie is very violent, but the way that Refn shoots the violence, it never feels exploitative. It feels like he's telling us something about the character. There's just this amazing moment when Gosling is in the elevator with these thugs and you just know he's with the girl of his dreams, that he really can't quite have. And she gets out of the elevator and he just sort of turns and he kicks the crap out of these guys. And it's just this incredibly just violent moment. And when he's done, it's just, it would be arty and pretentious and silly in almost anybody else's hands, but the way Refn shoots him, it's like it's from the back. It's like after the fight is over, and he's wearing this jacket that has a scorpion on the back. Yeah. And the way that the scorpion waves, like as he shoots it, as the door opens, as the girl sees what he's done, it's so great. The music is great.
Music is great.
Unbelievable. And there are the best behind the scenes stories like that are just, I think if they're not, they are slowly becoming legendary. And if you haven't heard them, they're amazing. Like the casting of Albert Brooks. Have you guys heard this story?
No.
Okay. So evidently that casting session was a disaster. So the story goes that Albert Brooks goes in to meet with Refn and meet with the executives, and he kind of gives this performance very much like what we saw, which is very understated Albert Brooks. And Refn in the audition kept pushing him to make it bigger and bigger and bigger, and just like he just wanted it bigger. He wanted his villain to be bigger, and Brooks was just like, oh, okay. And on the way out the door, when they go to shake hands, say thank you and all this, the story goes that Albert Brooks, okay, first of all, you have to understand, Nick Refn is 1 billion feet tall, okay? And so is Albert Brooks. On the way out the door, Brooks grabs Refn by the shirt, grabs him, and just hauls him in. And he looks at him and he goes, you don't have to shout to be a good villain. And then he lets him go, and he walks out. He gets a call from his agent 5 minutes later, right? We all know the story. And the agent goes, I know what you did in there, but they loved you. But Brooks was thinking, oh, my God, I'm never going to get this gig. There's also a great story about him trying to convince Ryan Gosling to be in the movie. And he met him at the Chateau Marmont, where he was getting drunker and drunker and drunker. And then they're driving around. And, they put in some music that was very much like what ended up in the movie. And Gosling was driving Refn home.
Right, because he doesn't drive.
Yeah, exactly. And like Refn was just sort of like there, and he was sad because Gosling was going to do his movie, and he's hanging out the window, and they're listening to the music. He goes, this is my movie. And Gosling was like, oh my God, I get it now. Let's do this. But it's so great. I could just watch this movie over and over.
Cool. Look, I love Drive. I think it's great. I remember same kind of thing. I hadn't seen anything of Refn's at that point. Thankfully, I hadn't seen only God Forgives, which I actually like. But
right.
And just was like, wow, this is amazing. And but I'm a little disappointed. I mean, I got to tell you, it's like we did Horror Week, we had Vampire Week, and then we did Monster Mash, and we did Psycho Killer, and we broke it up, and that was probably smart because it's like. We're doing Noir Week, and all I hear are these neo-noirs, and it's like the noir was built on the backs of some of the greatest noirs of all time, and I'm like, I feel...
We knew that you would be there.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I got to go there now. I mean, it's like I can't do Blue Velvet, I can't do Last Seduction, I can't do any of these neo-noirs because you guys, you're...
Stop whining!
I don't get it. It's like...
We got 2 more days to program.
We're not doing Neo-Noir Week. We're doing Noir Week.
Well,
anyway.
Well, now we're doing Neo-Noir Week.
I mean, Mulholland Drive, it's like, come on.
Well,
enough
just
with
change
those.
the title now. It's Neo-Noir.
No, I'm not changing the title. We're going to... Look, I'm sorry. This is easy.
Chinatown.
No. That's Neo-Noir, too. I'm not doing Chinatown. Plus, Steve doesn't like it. So... look, it's obviously unless we done.
Why don't you
before?
pick one of your black and white movies?
Yeah, damn right I will. Which is Noir. Did we do Double Indemnity before?
I don't believe so.
I feel like we might have.
I will check.
I'm not even going to give you 20 titles. I'm going to give you one.
We did Sunset Boulevard.
Oh yeah, well I knew that. That's why I wasn't going to say Sunset, but that was in Films About Filmmaking Week.
Right.
And unlike Darren, I'm not picking anything from season 1. I'm not.
No.
I'm not going to do it.
Yeah,
I mean,
apparently neither did I.
Yeah, he's a Superman.
Yeah, but that was special.
Okay, that was special. That was special. Okay, but yeah, so I don't want to do season 1. So I'm going to go with Double Indemnity. Although we already did Double Indemnity with Body Heat, but
well, it's the Noir so nice. We did it twice.
Double Indemnity, has that incredible Billy Wilder / a little bit of Raymond Chandler. He technically is credited and worked on a little bit, but dialogue. But it is the prototypical film noir.
Absolutely.
Barbara Stanwyck is the ultimate femme fatale. Fred McMurray, who, if you know him from My Three Sons, is nothing like he was in My Three Sons. It is twisty and turny and basically Fred McMurray is an insurance salesman who gets roped into. He's very weak. He's kind of like on Succession, Jeremy Strong's character. He kind of gets roped into the web of lies and deceit by Barbara Stanwyck. And one of the great
name, Walter Neff.
Walter Neff, yes, and of course, one of the great introductions of all time, where Barbara Stanwyck is on the top of this set of stairs, and she comes down in a towel where she's been presumably nude sunbathing outside in the back, and comes down, and there's this flirty banter between the two of them, and he's basically hitting on her the second he meets her.
Are you going to give me a ticket?
It's like, yeah, why don't you give that to my husband?
Yeah.
And Eddie G. Robinson is his boss, who, kind of is platonically in love with Walter Neff, he's been his mentor and has, really, just thinks the world of him. So, is ultimately going to be in for a rude awakening when he finds out that Walter Neff has conspired to kill their customer. Not only to kill him, but in an act of double indemnity to double the insurance payout on his death. And it is just incendiary. And Billy Wilder, again, one of the great writer-directors ever, beautifully directed, incredibly well written, and it is just dark and twisted, and you can see sort of amongst all these like nice homes and everything, and the darkness, the flip side of American life. I wouldn't even say post-war, because it's actually was made during the war. I mean, there's a scene in the grocery store, very famous.
Right.
People who haven't seen the movie may know it from Steve Martin's Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid, where he meets up with Barbara Stanwyck and Walter Neff in the grocery store.
Friday picks.
Come on, we haven't even done any noir yet. So it's such a great movie. It's such a great movie. Again, I say this a lot. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, but it is one of my favorite movies of all time.
A lot of them.
And it's just a masterclass in dialogue, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's brilliant. It's one of my favorites as well. It's.
How fast was I going, officer? There's a speed limit in this town. And
suppose you pull me over. Suppose I write you a ticket. Suppose I tear it up. So great. And the great location photography. I mean, they filmed it in Los Feliz, and
I went to the house.
I haven't been to the house. I don't know why. I used to live near the house, and I never went to it.
Oh yeah, I went to the house. I had to go to the house.
It's still there. It looks exactly the same.
It looks exactly the same on the outside. Yeah. And it's not quite the Brady house, but it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. So, but I just love this movie, and there are a couple of noirs that you just really are the template for what you think of as noir. Double Indemnity is one of them.
Sunset Boulevard.
Yeah, I mean there's some movies
Big
that got.
Sleep.
I mean there are other movies I could have gone with for Thursday.
Laura.
Well, I love Laura, and I almost went with that for Romance Week.
Mm-hmm.
Otto Preminger, a guy police officer falls in love with a portrait of a dead woman who turns out not to be dead. But with Gene Tierney is so great in that. Also Leave Her to Heaven, another Gene Tierney movie that she's amazing, and one of the great noirs. But my pick for Thursday is Double Indemnity. But boy, Friday is going to be.
It's a bloodbath.
It's going to be a bloodbath.
So many good ones.
It's going to be a bloodbath, and we're going to have to lie and cheat and steal in order to try and manipulate the correct pick for Friday. I mean, look,
if you want to start with some of the classics, the true golden era noirs,
I would like to.
Laura.
I sure haven't heard enough about them on this show.
Yeah, The Big Sleep.
The Big Sleep.
Gilda.
The Big Sleep is also one of my favorite movies, mostly because of the dialogue, and I'm a huge Humphrey Bogart fan. But I almost feel it belongs in Detective Week, or if we ever do Bogart Week.
Mm-hmm.
It's a noir, but it's not, in my sense, a classic noir. It's like I could see it very comfortably sliding into some other weeks, which is probably why I didn't pick Big Sleep, because Big Sleep to me is almost. I love almost as much as Double Indemnity. It's like
noir is one of those genres that lends itself to hybridization. There have been a lot of sci-fi noir or Western noir or detective noir.
I thought he was going to pick Blade Runner.
Yeah,
you know what?
Well, we've already selected Blade Runner for post.
I know, but not everybody's abiding by those rules. I think any of the James Wong Howe, movies. I mean, look, The Big Combo is not like the greatest movie in the world, but the cinematography like elevates it. That's the classic noir shot of them in the terminal after the heist with the smoke wafting in, and I love the look of that. I mean, there are all those Anthony Mann movies like T-Man and that also where it's like the cinematography alone, puts it on the list.
Well, there's one that I was always fond of called Force of Evil.
Oh, Force of Evil,
Abraham Polanski film. It's a really terrific script.
Well, of course, there's also Touch of Evil.
Touch of Evil,
of Evil, which was the traditional end of the noir era. Orson Welles
and
The Third Man.
The Third Man, of course.
Zither me this, Batman.
Or Stanley Kubrick made a really nice noir, The Killing.
The Killing is great.
A heist at a racetrack, a horse racetrack.
With an ending worthy of Rod Serling.
It's terrific. Correct. I love The Killing.
I love The Killing too, but I also love The Killers, based on the Ernest Hemingway story. But of course, only really the first 10 minutes has this great Nicholas Roger score. Burt Lancaster again. It's told in flashback, and it's a really, really good movie. It was remade years later, written by Gene Kuhn of all people, with Lee Marvin and Ronald Reagan. And it's not nearly as good as the original, but it's an interesting curiosity. And Criterion put out a double disc, so it has both versions of The Killers. Really highly recommended, because the original Killers is just a fantastic film noir, and then the remake, it's Gene Kuhn and Lee Marvin and Ronald Reagan. What's not to like? Other than Ronald Reagan.
Well, there's another one that's kind of a curiosity that I think you and I saw together at the Cinematheque called The Reckless Moment.
Oh, yeah.
That
James Mason.
That sounds about right.
That I always really appreciated, because it was filmed in part on location on Balboa Island in Newport Beach, and my cousins have had a house on that island for years, so we used to go down there all the time, and then seeing this film, which I think was 1946, 1947, and seeing how different it looked, in the 40s when it hadn't been developed within an inch of its life now. Like every square inch of that island is covered with these huge houses now, but then it was, a lot of trees and it was very rustic.
I'm going to dive into a pool and make a little distinction here, because as much as I love the Maltese Falcon, I think that is, again, Detective Week more than it is noir.
It's a hard-boiled detective
but
movie.
There's another detective movie that I do feel is noir, much a better candidate, which is Kiss Me Deadly, which is Ralph Meeker as Mike Hammer. It's filmed in the old Bunker Hill, which is, almost completely gone now from downtown LA. It's a bunch of office buildings, but at the time it was the backdrop. It was the seediest part of the city. It was a backdrop full of warehouses and tenements and transient hotels. And Kiss Me Deadly was sort of at the end of that era when it was filmed. And Angel's Flight is in there, and to me it's the consummate kind of LA noir. And Ralph Meeker is Mike Hammer. He has and it has a very famous ending, which obviously influenced and the great what's it that they're hunting for is the MacGuffin, which influenced Quentin Tarantino a lot. He basically apes that in Pulp Fiction. But Kiss Me Deadly it's a great noir.
Well, and speaking of Angel's Flight, there's one called Angel's Flight. Yes. That's a noir that was filmed on the Angel's Flight funicular.
Well, and you also, Robert Ryan in The Asphalt Jungle, which is one of my favorite noirs. Great cast. Sam Joffe's in it. It's another great caper. We talked about Drive having this great heist and Rafifi having this great heist. The Asphalt Jungle has an amazing heist in it as well. And, Robert Ryan is really fantastic. Wait, is Robert Ryan? Yeah, Asphalt Jungle is Robert Ryan. Sterling Hayden is in... The Killing. Right. So it's Robert. Yeah, Asphalt Jungle. Asphalt Jungle. Sterling Hayden or Robert Ryan? It's Robert Ryan.
It was at this point that Mark lost all his memory.
Look, I love the freaking Asphalt Jungle.
Yeah.
No, it's
the
it's
freaking
right.
Asphalt Jungle.
Yeah, and
nature did.
But then we talked about you talked about Touch of Evil, but then there's also Lady from Shanghai.
Absolutely.
Which that's one of the great tragedies. You talk about Magnificent Ambersons getting destroyed by the studio. I mean, Lady from Shanghai had 20 minutes cut out of it, 40 minutes cut out of it, and it's still this great movie, even with.
Yeah, it's wacky.
It's wacky, and the ending. Is basically been imitated so many times.
Right.
The shootout in the Hall of Mirrors,
right.
But that was a much longer sequence that got completely truncated, and all the footage was lost when it was basically studios just threw it out. Nothing was saved, and it's really sad because that movie, other than Orson Welles doing this weird Irish accent, it's really great, and Rita Hayworth is in it, who's magnificent, and Everett Sloane also is in it, and he's really great as the villain.
Yeah, and he's evil.
And he's evil with a capital E.
And a Vil.
Oh, God, you know what else I would say? Speaking of Rita Hayworth, Gilda.
Yeah. Well, Steve mentioned that before.
I love Gilda.
Yeah.
And Criterion did a great disc of that. I mean, that was, and it's I mean, Glenn Ford and her together.
Yeah.
What an amazing, I love Gilda.
Steamy.
But I think for Femme Fatale week, that might be my pick if we were doing Femme Fatale week.
That's a good one.
And DOA, which is not
right.
really a good movie, is it?
But
It's just a great
conceit.
concept.
Yes.
And the remake was good too.
Yeah, it was.
Did you like the remake?
Yeah,
Meg Ryan
I
and
did.
Dennis Quaid?
It was pretty good, actually.
Yeah. Publisher perish.
Nightmare Alley. They're remaking it. Guillermo del Toro's remaking it now. I love Nightmare Alley. And I don't really like Tyrone Power, but boy, that's a good movie.
Detour?
Yeah, Detour, I think, it's like, it's one of these poverty roll movies that were made for 2 cents, and it's sort of become like this definitive noir. I'm not a huge fan of Detour, although it does have that great scene where it's strangled with the phone cord. Do you like Detour?
I enjoyed it. Yeah, I saw it at the Noir Festival at the American Cinematheque every April.
Right,
does their Noir Festival, which is I haven't been able to make it to for the last couple of years. But
neither have I. We used to go all the time when we weren't mattress shopping.
Yeah,
and it was.
They showed some great. I mean, they had some deep cuts. I mean, they showed all kinds of. Usually, they aired on the side of the more obscure, which was cool.
Yeah, and they showed we saw some really great stuff there. Yeah. I'm trying to think. I think I saw Asphalt Jungle for the first time there. In A Lonely Place with Humphrey Bogart and Gloria Graham. Speaking of Gloria Graham, what about Big Heat?
Yeah,
which is really good. And early Lee Marvin role, where he famously throws a boiling cup of coffee on Gloria Graham's face and scars her. I mean, that's the thing. At the time, people can't realize, now you can see anything on film. But noir was always pushing the envelope, both violence and sex and, the very limits of the Hays Code. And that was really interesting, the ways that they would do that. You said, and morality, just the whole idea that, the way the gangster films grappled with these issues, but it felt like the cat was completely out of the bag when you start to look at these classic noir films. We didn't even mention Night of the Hunter.
Oh my God, no, so
you
good.
just did.
But now we did.
That's why I mentioned it. It's a great movie. That's why I mentioned it.
Or Night of the Lepus.
Well, that's pretty scary too, for a whole different reason.
It's Night of the Week. Here on the 430 movie.
I'm Blue Velvet, if we're going to go neo-noir.
Well, there's a number of really great neo-noirs. Blue Velvet and Mulholland Drive, which is terrific. Bound, the Wachowski brothers.
Bound is great. Bound is really great.
Yep.
I mean, it's really beautifully directed. They made it for about $4 million. No one went to see it.
Yeah.
But it's Gina Gershon and Jennifer Tilly. And
Joey Pants,
and Joey
Pantoliano.
Really good movie.
I think people kind of discovered it. Like after the Matrix,
Yeah.
when they kind of went back and retrospectively went, oh yeah, okay, you can sort of see that those guys know what
That's
the hell
so
they're doing.
cleverly. I mean, they were able to write this movie that took place in essentially one location,
Mhm.
or and another apartment that they could use the same set for, basically.
Yep.
Very cleverly produced, and so tightly written, and just.
But it's
really
a visual
great,
tour de
small-
force.
Yeah.
And it's funny, it's the one reason I was excited about The Matrix, because I liked Bound so much
Yeah, me
that
too.
I was like, oh, well, maybe this movie won't suck. And then, of course, I saw it and it was like amazing.
Arguably, Collateral.
Oh, yeah.
Collateral,
It definitely
sure.
qualifies as
Yeah.
neo-noir, for sure.
You could say a couple of the Coen Brothers films, Blood Simple and Fargo.
Right.
Yeah,
No
both
Country.
Neo-noirs.
But
No Country.
that was in last year's Oscar.
Well, and they're both versions of Postman Always Rings Twice. The original Lana Turner version, and then, of course, the remake with Jessica Lange and Jack Nicholson and John Colicos. Baltar.
Baltar.
I the only reason I have to tell you, when I saw the remake of Postman Always Rings Twice, was it for Jessica Lange? No. Was it for Jack Nicholson? No. It was because John Colicos, who'd been in Star Trek, was in it. And I'm not a huge fan of the Postman Always Rings Twice, the remake. I love the original movie. I don't think that the Bob Rafelson remake is that great. But John Colicos is in it.
Damn right.
It was glorious.
And you mentioned The Last Seduction earlier.
Yeah, John Dahl.
That's good. Strange Days.
That's an
science
interesting
fiction.
choice.
Wow.
Strange Days.
Ooh, interesting.
Written by James Cameron.
Was it?
Yep.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
directed by
Catherine
Catherine
Bigelow.
Bigelow.
Well,
Who should work more? Who's just
Really
great?
if we're pushing like into the genre films that are really noir, I mean, oh my God, Ashley, where is your brain, dude? Catherine Bigelow, vampires.
Oh,
Yeah,
Near
Near
Dark.
Dark.
Near Dark. Thank
Yeah,
you.
but that's not
What was
really
wrong with
noir.
you?
That's not
no,
noir.
That's a
not
noir.
true. No,
for sure.
No.
Yeah, it's like a vampire noir.
No, I don't think so.
What else has she did? Blue Steel. No, but that was
Blue Steel.
Yeah.
Blue
Which is
Steel.
also a look that you can throw into.
I mean, and there are a whole bunch of these detective films.
LA
like
Confidential.
Oh my
right?
God, yeah.
LA Confidential is a great example of neo noir. Wonderfully done by the late Curtis Hanson.
Yeah.
Yep. One of my alt picks was going to be Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
Oh yeah,
which is just delightful. That's one of those
It
that
is.
sort of falls into the it's funny yet it still like meets every definition, and the dialogue just crackles. It was the thing that that brought Shane Black back,
Yeah.
and kind of relaunched his career.
I like Nice Guys.
Me
too.
too. I think Nice Guys is great.
is good.
Yeah.
The
But I
Grifters.
love the
Yeah.
Grifters. Jim Thompson. Yeah. Really good. Directed by
Stephen Frears.
Stephen Frears. Yeah. And so good. And John Cusack's great. Angelica Houston's amazing in it. Another
And
really good heist.
Annette Bening's in it,
Annette
right?
Benning.
Annette Bening. Yeah.
It's one of her early roles.
Right.
Yeah, and she's really good in it. And I mean, there's some great femme fatale action happening there. See, I mean, it's just a total embarrassment of riches. But I
don't think we're going to come to a consensus.
I don't
No,
know
I think
that
we can. I think we can.
Maybe.
I mean, because I was going to get into whole Murder My Sweet, when we get into the Philip Marlowe, because of course, to me, the greatest Philip Marlowe, unquestionably, is Humphrey Bogart in The Big Sleep.
Yeah.
But there are people who would argue that Powell and Murder My Sweet is the greatest. Like Kay, our friend Kay, who loves, and I don't think holds a candle to. And then Robert Montgomery is just another Philip Marlowe who's terrible.
Out of Sight.
Oh, Out of Sight's a great choice.
I love Out of Sight.
So good.
You think it's Out of Sight?
It is Out of Sight.
Out of Sight.
The Steven Soderbergh movie with George Clooney and Jennifer Lopez, and Michael Keaton reprising his role from Get Shorty.
Yeah. And, Jennifer Lopez playing Karen Sisko, who then, of course, had her own show on ABC, and also reprised, but not named, on Justified.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Right. I
Criss
love
Cross.
Out of Sight. That's one of my favorite neo-noirs.
I love Out of Sight, too.
The chemistry between Clooney and Lopez is just terrific.
Well, and Soderbergh is so wonderfully directed. That scene where they meet in the hotel, and it's the love scene intercut with the dinner, like the future with the past, with the present. It's really
falling.
Great.
And Albert Brooks, in that movie as well.
See, sometimes you don't have to yell to be a villain.
Yeah. That's right.
Sometimes
you do. But
sometimes
Out of Sight
yell
is
really
just,
loud.
It's got a great love story in it. It's got suspense, and it's funny as hell.
So funny.
So entertaining.
Yeah. That's a movie that doesn't get enough credit because, I mean, it's really, Out of Sight is great.
I kept trying to push our young writers this last year to watch it. I think
Oh,
I mentioned
yeah?
The Room like 3 times and like tweeted like, it's on HBO right now. You can watch, you can stream it.
How did I miss those conversations?
Maybe you're out of the room.
I should have made them watch it.
Right?
So
If only I'd known.
You want to continue on the show, you have to watch Out of Sight.
And
Once
you
you're
like it. It's
done
not
with
some
the Corbin
old,
maneuver.
boring movie. It's super
It's a
entertaining.
young, exciting movie.
Great music.
Mm-hmm.
Great cast.
You know, and then there are all those great Cedamac movies, you know, Crisscross and
Crisscross.
You know, and you could argue that Hitchcock's Strangers on a Train, but we picked that last for Hitchcock Week. What else? So many. I mean, and there's so many that we're not even mentioning because there's just such an embarrassment of riches in this. What a great genre! It's like, you know, a lot of these noirs, even when they're bad, they're good. You know, they're just, you know. But you can make them cheap, and it wasn't. There was no barrier to entry. It's like you can't make a cheap superhero movie and make it well.
Yeah.
You know, it's like because then you end up with Reb Brown and Captain America, right?
Right.
But you know, with noir, you don't need a huge budget. You know, and obviously you talked about the John Dahl, The Last Seduction, or Bound.
Yeah.
You know, which is so great. So. Let's do it this way for Friday. Let everyone say what based on what you think, and then we can, like, from what we've talked about, what do you think? What would you want for Friday?
Oh my God.
And then we can try and horse trade. I'm torn between Touch of Evil and Bound.
Those are both great movies.
I mean, I would argue Kiss Me Deadly, but I don't think I'm going to win that one. So I'm going to go with stuff that I think are winners. So I think Touch of Evil or Bound potentially.
I would go with Touch of Evil.
It did end the traditional noir era,
so it
to
should
end
end
our
the
week might be appropriate. Now, which version would it be? Would it be the theatrical version, or about 15 years ago they did the Wells memo cut?
Yeah, you know, I'm actually fine with the theatrical version.
I have to agree with you. I think sometimes...
Says the man who did the director's edition.
Yeah. But...
Although the difference was Robert Wise was alive.
Yes.
And Orson Welles was long dead when they did Touch of Evil. They just reconstituted it based on his memos to the studio.
Yeah, holy crap. Anybody who's ever tried to do an edit based just on somebody's goddamn notes?
My God.
Right.
What do you think, Ashley? Will you have a pick? You have a horse in this race?
I'm a little enamored of the Out of Sight pick, but I do love Bound, and I also love Touch of Evil, and I agree with Darren that if it's Touch of Evil, it needs to be the original theatrical cut.
I'm good. Those are all great picks. I love all those films dearly. I think since maybe we gave a little bit of short shrift to classic noir, I'm inclined to go with Touch of Evil to round out the week with a more traditional noir.
I could totally go with Touch of Evil because you really can't beat Charlton Heston as Mexican. And Marlene Dietrich is great, and obviously Orson Welles. You know, your future's all used up. Yeah. You know, so again, super quotable. It's even though he continued to make movies after Touch of Evil, it is really his last great masterpiece.
Well, he was some kind of a man.
What do you think, Ashley? Can you go with Touch of Evil?
I can 100% go with Touch of Evil.
Okay.
I think
we have a week. Very interesting, dark, twisted week.
Indeed.
And it's only appropriate that we had a cajole and go down alleys not taken to get to our
very
our
dark
Friday,
alleys.
Very dark alleys.
Put your knives away, boys.
It would have come to that, I'm telling you. So Monday.
Monday's Carl Franklin's One False Move.
Tuesday.
Body Heat.
Wednesday.
Nicholas Winding Refn's Drive.
Thursday, it's Double Indemnity. And Friday, it's Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid. Oh, no, wait.
No.
Friday, it is touch of evil.
Show us on the doll where the evil.
Well, you can't go wrong with any of these movies. There's some great movies here. And for those of you in our audience who aren't as familiar with film noir, this is a great introductory 101.
And actually, so is Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid.
Yeah, true.
That's all right.
It does have a lot of clips from some
all classic
great
noir
movies.
It does. I mean, we didn't even talk about Out of the Past.
Right.
I mean, oh my God. I was just like, no, we may have to revisit this genre because there's just so much here. And of course, if you're enjoying listening to the audio versions of Fourth Day Movie, you can watch them now on video on Electric Now, which is available for streaming on Stirr and Distro TV, and soon to be available on the Electric Now app. So check us out on video. And of course, you can still, if you enjoy listening to us on audio, you can continue to listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. So we hope you'll continue to do that. Maybe what you do is like you listen to us in the car and then you watch us and take notes for the movies you want to then watch. And,
Yes, watch and
either
listen.
way,
watch and
the cost is free. It costs you nothing.
Or you could turn down the sound on the video one.
We're not asking.
You could, and see if you can sync it up.
We're
So
not.
it's like
We're not
censor
asking
out.
for money. We're not running Kickstarter campaigns. We're just saying, come listen, come watch, come enjoy. Anyway,
all are welcome.
So ends the lesson. So thank you for joining us on the 430 Movie. And if you're a fan of the podcast, you may want to check out Electric Surge's other podcasts like Inglorious Trexperts every Saturday, the only podcast for Star Trek fans with a life, and The Rebel and the Rogue, a Star Wars podcast every Tuesday. And of course, one of my favorite podcasts truly is Best Movies Never Made every other Monday. And that's from host Steve Scarlatta, the producer of Jodorowsky's Dune, and the writer of Sonic the Hedgehog and curator of Friday Night Frights, Josh Miller, doing a phenomenal job with that podcast. And, I really enjoy listening to it, I must say. So speaking of podcasts, if you enjoy this podcast, which I also enjoy listening to, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts if you enjoy listening to it. And if you don't, well, don't rate us anything. Or
just rate us 5 stars anyway.
5 stars. 5 is the magic number.
5 stars.
5 stars. And of course, we would be remiss if we did not thank producer and a very special sound engineer who makes us sound so good every week and is now mixing for audio and video, Bill Ritter. Bill Ritter, what film noir did we miss or would you pick for this week?
How about Joan Crawford, Mildred Pierce?
Excellent, which we did not even talk about. Much to a classic noir that influenced a lot of people.
That's true.
And of course, Joan Crawford is amazing in it. And a notable omission by us. So thank you for catching us on that one, for backstopping us. That was a great suggestion. Also John, thank you for pitching in while Natalie Miscali is out of town. We appreciate you directing today's episode. And of course, very special thanks to Dean Devlin, without whom the show would not be possible. So to all of you out there in Listenerland,
Here's looking at you.
Here's looking at you.
Here's
what?
Only because we're on video, though.
I don't know. All I can say is, this has been a dark day for the podcast, but we appreciate you joining us, and we will see you next week for an all new episode of the 430 Movie. Until then, Eyewitness News starts now.
This episode is brought to you by Omni Consumer Products, OCP. Good business is where you find it. Makers of the ED-206 Urban Pacification System. Big is back, because big is better. And the 6000 SUX, an American tradition.
This is a production of the Electric Surge Network.